Hey everybody, thank you for joining me for another episode of Amir's Anecdotes. Today I've got Kevin. Thank you for joining us today. Thank you for sharing your story. I hope someone else can listen to this and if they're feeling down on themselves, realize that they have more resources than they think they do. They just have to think about it in a different way. Kevin, where are you calling from?
I live in New Hampshire.
Ah, wow. That is the least diverse state, I think. I've read that somewhere.
I would believe it. Yeah, I would believe it for sure. I moved here because it's cheaper than Massachusetts and for literally no other reason.
Yeah. Coincidentally, I do get a lot of people on here that are from Massachusetts originally.
I believe it. I think, I don't know, it's got some of the best education. It's got some of the best hospitals in the country. So it's a good place to live. It's just wildly expensive.
Yeah, yeah. Now, where did you grow up in Massachusetts?
I grew up like an hour outside of Boston.
I knew you were going to describe it by way of the distance from Boston.
That's the only, I feel like for most people, that's the only way to do it. Then, so I'll take it down another layer. The second biggest city in Massachusetts is Worcester. I grew up like 20 minutes from Worcester. That's where I grew up.
Okay.
Yeah.
So where is that? Needham, Ayer, Leominster?
No.
I know Massachusetts towns.
Uxbridge. You ever heard of Uxbridge?
Okay. I probably drove past it. My wife's family's from Groton.
Oh, okay. Right on.
So I have to drive through all those weird towns.
Yeah. Groton's beautiful. Beautiful place.
Yeah, it's nice.
Yeah.
All right, so you're from, let's call it Worcester, Massachusetts. Yeah. And now you're in New Hampshire.
Yes.
So what do you do for a living, Kevin?
I'm an entrepreneur and a business owner, and I usually say I'm a podcaster. That's usually what I say because that's usually what leads the conversation in the most positive direction. But I have a podcast. I have two podcasts. One's about self-improvement. The other one's about podcasting. And then we've been able to build a coaching business from the podcast.
Oh, that's cool.
Yeah.
That's pretty meta. You have a podcast about podcasting.
If you want to be the expert in something, you got to do a podcast on it. And it just happens to be a podcast about podcasts. So it works nicely.
That's great. Yeah. I like that. And now how old are you, Kevin?
I am 35.
Nice. There you go. You're on the other side of youth.
Yes. Yeah. Some days it feels that way. Other days it doesn't. It depends on the weather.
Right. Yeah. Right. Or if you sleep on, a little rickety on one side.
100%.
Right?
If you said that to me 15 years ago, I would say, I don't know what you're talking about. Now I know what you're talking about all too well.
Yep. Yeah. All you got to do is wake up literally on the wrong side of the bed and your neck's messed up all day.
Yep. Yeah.
You're like this.
It's brutal.
Nice. So what did you do before you were a podcaster?
I did everything. I worked at a gas station. I was a personal trainer. I was a forklift operator, truck driver, on-call firefighter for a very short amount of time.
Wow.
Construction, tiling. I did a bunch of stuff. But the thing that I fell into that ultimately ended up becoming my career before this was weatherization. That was the industry I was in. Yeah.
So what is involved in that? I've never even heard of this.
Yeah. So especially, I guess it's all over the country now, but especially on the East Coast, there was a lot of money going into energy conservation. So the company I worked for, we would go into buildings that were very big, usually schools, and it was our job to retrofit the buildings to make them more energy efficient.
Interesting. So like insulating all the stuff, making sure the heat stays in.
Yeah, working on windows, doors, attics, basements, above the ceilings. So yeah, all types of stuff. Our thing was we keep the good air in and the bad air out. That was essentially what we're trying to do in a nutshell. Yeah.
Got it. And so how many years did you do that for?
I did that for probably 4. And it was this very weird thing where I went to a job fair and they said, these are the skills that you can learn. And I said, this weatherization thing looks good. I'm somebody who likes to work with my hands. That was like my identity. I like to work with my hands. I'm good at that.
Yeah. Yeah.
And then I graduated this thing. And at the end, they said, we're going to connect you with the best company. And I said, okay, I don't know what that means. And they said, well, there's a lot of travel involved, but you're going to be making anywhere from $50 to $75 an hour. And I said, this is not real. There's no way this is real. I'm going to get thrown in a van and taken away. This is not a real thing. It ended up being a very real thing. So that was kind of my first dipping my toe into what potentially felt like success.
Wow. Okay, nice. And how old were you when you got that job?
23, I think.
23.
Yeah.
Okay. And then so did you go to college?
No college.
Okay, got it. So you were like kind of spent your early adulthood kind of Forrest Gumping your way through different, life career paths, right?
Yep.
And then 23 you get this weatherization job. You do that from 23 to 27. And then what happens there at 27?
So, man, I went through a really tough breakup.
Mhm.
When I went through that breakup, I decided that I hadn't made enough money yet. So I decided that if I make more money, all of my problems will go away. I think that's like
Sure.
a really common thing. So I grinded my face off. I made $100,000 that year when I was 26.
Nice.
And then I realized that for most of my life, I had lived unconsciously. I don't know why I do. I mean, look at the jobs. I don't know why I did any of those. It was just like the next
Right.
available option. The opposite of unconscious is hyperconscious. So I started a podcast in 2017 called the Hyperconscious Podcast.
Nice.
And that's where all this started. And I fell in love with podcasting as I fell out of love with my job because I realized this isn't going to fix the problems that I thought it was going to fix. So
Right.
I started calling out of work and I started leaving the job sites early, and my mental health was just in a really bad place, and all the traveling was catching up to me. And I ended up sitting on the edge of a bed thinking to myself, if I was just to take my life, I would take my problems with me. And after that, I realized, look, this is not a viable thing. So I ended up leaving my job in 2018. And then I started doing this full time in 2018.
Wow.
Yeah. With
Wow,
no results.
That's incredible.
Full-time work, zero results. No pay. No full-time
Yeah.
pay.
Wow. Man, that's a story. And I'm glad that you're still here with us today. And that's quite an arc of your life. Like there's various chapters here, right? Obviously there's the school years, and then you go into what I like to call that little Forrest Gump era of doing a lot of stuff. And then you started that weatherization chapter, and then you started that podcasting chapter where that transition era was that stress and that suicidal ideation.
Yeah.
And so that obviously there's a lot more that we can dive into on any chapter of that story. But the one that I want to kind of focus in on is as you review that, as you think back on now at 35, things that happened to you 3 years ago, 5, 10, 15 years ago. What would strike you as like the most financially stressful position you were in?
There's two close ones, but I would say when I left my job to do this full time, I didn't save up. I had $10,000 in the bank, and I assumed that was going to last me far longer than it was going to. That I ended up moving in with my best friend, and I was paying $500 a month rent. So I did a lot of things that I thought I could do to lessen the blow. But a year later, I was already in credit card debt. I couldn't afford to pay my car insurance, so I got sent to collections. My car was like, this was cartoon stuff. I'd pull up to a red light and my car would just shut off.
Oh.
And I would just sit there trying to get it started again. It was absolutely, the brakes were going, everything. It was just absolutely brutal. And then it got to the point where I couldn't pay rent. And I lived with my now wife at the time. She was my girlfriend. And then in 2019, I literally couldn't afford to buy Christmas presents for my girlfriend. And that was you want to talk about just feeling like a failure and feeling like a loser. That for me was the most financially scarce and just feeling stuck that I had ever felt. And I was somebody who just never felt smart enough, and I never felt good enough. So I kind of always expected to feel that.
Sure.
But this was different. It was just the deepest hole I've ever dug myself into, for sure.
Yeah. So let's continue to color that a little bit.
Please.
So the listeners can really kind of feel what you felt. So it's December, it's Christmas 2019. Your car's crapping out on you. You can't afford Christmas presents for your significant other. What's your income looking like for 2019?
2019, man, 2017, 2018, probably like $25,000.
Wow.
Yeah.
And your rent's $500, right? You got that little bit of a sweetheart deal from your friend.
Yeah.
And how much do you have in the bank?
Nothing. Oh, no.
Nothing.
At this point, I am purely living off of credit cards. Okay. And it was like I had really good credit when I was making good money. So I was trying to leverage how many credit cards can I get before it starts to really make an impact in my
Yeah.
life. So I think I was just living life off of probably like 4 credit cards at that point.
Wow. And how much credit card did you have in total?
Debt,
Yeah.
like at the highest point, I think it was like 35,000.
Wow. So in 2019, you made 25 grand pre-tax.
Yeah.
And you had 35,000 in credit card debt.
Yep.
With nothing in the bank.
Yep.
Wow.
And the hard thing is that's not including, I mean, yeah, I guess if we made $50,000 and we split it half, but everything went back into the business. All of the money was going back into the business. I was taking almost none at that point.
Right.
Yeah.
So your podcast business is earning, 25 grand, but you have to pay the podcast business's expenses, right? So it's not like that was available to you.
Right.
And you have that credit card debt. So as you're sitting in that moment, remembering December of 2019 at the real valley of financial stress that you faced thus far in life, what's going through your head in terms of how are you going to turn this around and get out of this? Are you talking to your friends and family? Are you talking to your girlfriend about it? Are you kind of keeping that close to the vest?
So my business partner is a math genius, luckily.
Okay.
And he's got a master's in business and he's an electrical and computer engineer. He's very, very intelligent and very good with money. So him and I had really started working together closely in 2018. We were really suffering together at this point. So he literally moved in with his mom so we could build this business. So he was suffering. He had very little money. So yeah, him and I were having a lot of conversations about the fact that right now it sucks, but we do have plans. It just doesn't feel like any of those plans are paying off because it's a very, very short period of time. My best friend that I lived with before I moved in with my girlfriend knew about it. My girlfriend, now wife, knew about it. So the people closest to me knew exactly what I was going through. And I think the hardest thing was just making sure that I held the belief. Because if I lost belief, then everybody around me would lose belief too. And it would be abundantly obvious that we weren't going to figure this out.
No, that makes sense, right? Like you have to, have that belief. Otherwise, you have nothing. And literally at that time, yes, because you had no money, that's all you had was belief.
Pretty much, yeah. Yeah, I was living on hope, as they say.
But I think the good thing here that I'm hearing is you weren't really like self-isolating, right? You were talking to your roommate, you were talking to your friend, you were talking to your business partner, you were talking to your girlfriend. And I find that more often than not, when I'm, on the show, especially, right, talking to people about financial stress that they've faced, they're very much like not telling anyone about it, and they're taking the position that like nobody would understand. So how did you get out of that debt?
I focused on trying to grow the business, and I started from a place of understanding that I had a lack of awareness around money. So as you heard in the story, my identity was I just kind of gotten lucky in the past. When I got that job that made me a lot of money, I didn't decide and then figure out how to do it and then give myself a pat on the back. I felt like I got lucky. So I realized that I didn't really have that much awareness around money. And that's something that I just connected at that point. I didn't really understand that before. I thought when you make a lot of money, you know a lot about money. And that isn't
right.
That isn't true necessarily. So that was one. I started learning about money. I started learning about numbers, and I started learning about sales, and I started learning about business. And from there, I did my absolute best to try to make sure that the decisions I was making was not just from a place of scarcity. One thing I've talked to a lot of people about, especially when you're trying to build your own thing, is you make very bad decisions with people when you're coming from a place of scarcity. It's not just about making money from Amir. I have to build a relationship with you. I can't just try to sell you something because I'm scared and I'm scarce. Yeah. So I really leaned into self-improvement. I really leaned into personal development. I tried to set expectations with myself and with my girlfriend at the time of, look, we're not going to be able to travel. We're going to have to take what feels like a step back in life in order to take a step forward in the next 5 years. And then from there, it was, all right, let's build this business. What are the things that we could do to grow the business? And we kind of just went to work on that.
Yeah, it's interesting that your solution was really kind of to look inward, right? Educate yourself, skill up, focus entirely on gaining some more skills and gaining the sales and growing the business. And while I think it's great that you were, you know, speaking and not having on the loneliness and the self isolation that a lot of people have. You were talking to your roommate, you were talking to your business partner, you were talking to your girlfriend, obviously, but did you reach out to mentors, business coaches, financial advisors, attorneys? Like me putting my financial advisor hat on,
Mm.
I'm thinking about like, well, instead of just running up credit card debts, you could have gone to the Small Business Administration and got a small business startup loan, right? And done lower interest business debt instead of running up 30% interest credit cards.
Yeah.
Um, like obviously hindsight's 2020, right? So like you didn't know that you had that option at the time, but I think part of the reason you didn't know that you had that option is it sounds like you weren't leveraging professionals. You were really just leveraging yourself in your own time.
Yeah. Yeah, I would say that's accurate. That was a piece of it. And then the other thing too was I think my business partner and I genuinely thought this was going to work faster than it did. So I think we were just thinking, yeah, we'll suffer for a couple of years and then we'll figure it out. And I didn't realize how bad the suffering was going to be. I didn't realize what that was going to look like. And then COVID happened and that was a whole different thing that shook up the
Yeah,
entire,
brutal.
right? But for some reason our business grew a ton during COVID. So it was this really weird thing where we just thought it was going to happen a lot faster than it did. So it didn't really seem like we needed to get outside feedback. But in
Right.
hindsight, yes, it would have been highly, highly beneficial for sure.
Right. Yeah, exactly. Right. So it's really interesting that just the story that you're sharing because you made it out and you weren't isolated anyway, right? And I think a lot of times on the show, especially, like people don't talk to other people about money, and you were talking to people about money, just not professionals.
Right.
Wow. So now you are. It's 2024. We're late 2024. You're 5 years out from that Christmas.
Yep.
What are the numbers looking like now?
Oh man. So earlier this year we crossed in total gross $1 million in the business. And that's
Wow.
Yeah, I mean that's in the last that we've been in business for coming up on 8 years, but that's really in like the last 4 years. So, yeah, this year we should do close to 400,000 in the business. And
It's incredible.
Yeah. And we're really focused on building cash on hand, making sure that we're operating debt free. All the things that were a pain in the butt that caused us problems in the past.
Sure.
We're focused on making sure we don't put ourselves into those holes again. And we're really focused on slow growth as opposed to growing at an unsustainable rate. So yeah, it's been a very interesting turnaround. And that's why, like, in my mind, 2019 sucked really bad. It was brutal. It was challenging for sure. 2020 was really challenging as well. But so many of the skills that I use today and a lot of the confidence that I have and a lot of the look, we're going to figure this out. A lot of that was born in those times. So I do look back on it with a positive view as opposed to a negative one. But again, would I have done things differently? Yes, for sure.
Sure. Now, at your lowest point, like why didn't you give up? Right? Because it's not like you had a plan in place.
I realized how privileged I am to actually try to live my dream. I mean, this wasn't something that I had to like push myself to do. I love podcasting. And when I first started podcasting, I remember saying, imagine if you could do this for a living. If I could do this for a living and I could have my own business and I could podcast 7 times a week and I could add value into people's lives and I could be my own boss, that would be the most fulfilling life ever of all time. It wasn't an option. It just wasn't an option. This is the interesting thing, Amir. My business partner and I were very broke, and my business partner is very well connected to people. And one of his mentors said, if I gave you $1 million today, how much could you turn it into in 5? And my business partner wouldn't take the meeting with his billionaire friends.
Really?
Yeah, we've always wanted to be a grassroots startup where nobody can ever tell us what to do. There's two of us that own the business. We're best friends. We're in this together. We have similar core values, core beliefs, and core aspirations. So in a way, I feel like we have just made it harder on ourselves because we know we'll survive, and we're more focused on how good will we be when we get there, not how fast can we get there. So I realize we've kind of done it backwards in that
Yeah, I mean, I would say so.
way.
But it's interesting that you did it in that way, and you didn't have the, I think, external pressures of like sick parent or family member or like three
Yeah.
kids that you're trying to like buy groceries for, right? Like two dudes in their late 20s, early 30s, like, we're gonna eat ramen noodles. It's all right. We'll live.
Yeah. Circumstances. I think that's a
Yeah,
really important thing. And I'm very grateful you bring that up, because I always say when I left my job, my car was paid off, although it was a piece of crap and barely running. My
yeah,
car was paid off. I was paying $500 a month to live with my best friend, and I had no mortgage. I didn't really have any other expenses. I had saved some money, and there was nobody that was relying on me. So, and I think
yeah.
that's a really important thing to note
Absolutely.
for sure.
And I talk to people about that all the time, where that that in and of itself is a form of resourcefulness. And I think like a cool takeaway for someone in a similar position that's listening to this is that you have more resources than you think you have. And those resources, even if they're limited, right? You know, you can make the most of what you have. And when we talk about your resources, you're like, yeah, 2019, man, I had nothing. That's not accurate. You had community, and you had a paid off car, and you had no
Mm.
dependents. Like that in and of itself is a resource. I talk to, oftentimes I end up talking to women that are in sales, and when I talk to them about like the resources that they have available, they're like, oh, I don't have this or I don't have that. Like all I am is a pretty face. And I'm like, no, that's a resource. Like you're using that as a resource to your
Mm.
advantage. Same thing with athletes that are using their natural affinity to like recover faster,
Yep.
right? Or not be super dehydrated. Like that is a resource that you can choose to utilize and leverage just in a non-traditional way. And I think it's not all about like, oh, I didn't have any money. So when you talk about 2019, you're like, I had nothing. I think that's actually a misnomer. I think you had a lot in just a very non-traditional fashion. You had things that money can't buy.
Mm. Yeah. Yeah, that's fair. I think that's a very accurate. I had very little money,
Yeah,
but
right.
I had great people in my life, and I was very focused on trying to climb out of the hole, and I think that's a really good. And I'm sure you talk about it all the time, but resources versus resourcefulness. Those are very, very different,
Yeah,
very, very different things. My business partner, when we were going through it, he sent me a
yeah.
book and he said, Kev, you got to read this book. And it's called Stretch. And the book is
Mm,
all about how to do the maximum amount with the least. And
yeah,
that's become a fundamental in our business today. So yeah, I can't speak to that enough.
yeah, yeah. I mean, sitting down and taking stock of what you do have instead of wallowing in what you don't have
Yeah,
really is kind of the key.
100%.
No, I love that. I think that's something that hopefully will resonate with everyone that's listening to this. Kevin, I think that's an amazing
I
story. I
appreciate it.
think your resilience and resourcefulness um, is really a testament of like kind of making something out of nothing. And it's not nothing, right? Like I would tell you to not refer to your 2019 version of yourself as someone who had nothing, because you had a lot and you made the most of it.
I appreciate that. And I will take that to heart for sure, my friend.
All right, man. So, Kevin, if anyone wants to get in touch with you, do a deeper dive on you, your business, what you do for a living, hear more about your story, how can they reach out to you?
Yeah, I just give out my email. So my email is
Sure.
kevin at nextleveluniverse.com. You can shoot me an email. I do my own emails. The podcast is Next Level University. You'll hear a lot about us and our stories because we do an episode every day. So, and that's always free. There's no ads. That's our free value
That's
we
great.
want to bring to the world. Yeah.
That's great. And well, so now, real quick, how do you make money then if there's no ads in your podcast?
we have built a business. So today, between my business partner, myself, and we have one certified coach that we've trained, we have probably like 95 clients that we work with
Okay.
every month. So we have an app that we developed. We have a journal. For us, it's if you like self-improvement and you like the podcast and you want to go deeper into self-improvement, we can do one-on-one coaching. We can do group coaching. So yeah, everything for us is we are giving you value at a deeper and deeper and deeper level. And that's
incredible.
Yeah, that's how but again, we're weird in the fact that we decided that in the beginning. I have people that reach out for sponsorships all the time. I'm not interested. I want to do this my way. I want to build a real, aligned, authentic business. And I'd rather us figure it out how to do it sustainably than rely on somebody else to do it for us.
That's really cool.
Appreciate it.
All right. Well, Kevin, thank you for joining us today. Thank you for sharing your story. I hope someone else can listen to this and if they're feeling down on themselves, realize that they have more resources than they think they do. You just have to think about it in a different way. And we'll catch you on the next episode.